most creator campaigns will include paid media amplification. So that is a huge trend. And that also means that creator content is a driving force behind social ad spending altogether.
Hey, Jasmine, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Alessandro. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very happy. You are well known in the industry. I know that you have a lot of data and insight to share with us. So quite curious to go, in all the questions that I have for you today. But before we get started, in depth, questions about the industry. I'm doing these new things, with new guests on. So to, tell a bit more about, yourself. And I like now to use this new structure that is called MAP. And basically it's divided in 3 different ways, right? So it's the mission, the achievements, and the purpose, right? So the first one is what do you want to achieve with what you do, right? The second is any notable milestones in your career or life that you would like to share. And the last one is the purpose. So why do you do what you do?
Not an easy question, but I'll give it a shot. In terms of what I want to achieve, I think big picture thinking, I'd like to have an impact. And I think that's what's drawn me to social media. It's also what's drawn me to the job that I'm in, because both of these things give me a platform to try and do that. In terms of milestones, I think one of the biggest ones for me happened, pretty recently, actually. My career has kind of taken off over the past year and a half or so. I studied journalism, and ever since I was a kid, I really wanted to A, be in the New York Times, and B, be on American TV news. And both of those things have happened in the last year or so. And then purpose, I'm a storyteller. And again, I think that's another reason why I love social media. It is this intersection of people, of society, of business, of commerce, and of politics, all of these things in one. And I like to tell the stories there. And I think it's a perfect reflection of what's really going on in society at large. Does that work?
Amazing. You did a great job. Absolutely. And congratulations for your achievements. And I have a couple of questions about live TV and everything. I'm going to ask you a bit later. And so you already said a bit, about going from you studied journalism and you got into social media. You already said a bit about that. But was anything else in there that made you be okay, I really want to choose this specific category and industries, so social media, the creator economy, influencer marketing? Was there something that happened during your career that made you be okay, I want to go 100% on these?
Well, it sort of happened by accident, but I think the other piece that drew me to it is that I'm a bit of a research nerd, a lot of a research nerd. And I like working with data and with numbers and using that to tell a story. I am of the firm belief, though, that data only tells part of the story, and you need to add some context around it, which is why I, love writing and telling these stories with all of that intertwined into one. But I would say, I kind of fell into it accidentally. But it was a happy accident. And I've been, using social media since Facebook became Facebook. So it kind of just fit perfectly with what I wanted to do.
And since you said that you love do research, right? And pretty sure that you spend a lot of time during the day. I'm quite curious, what does your typical day look like? Do you wake up? What is it the first thing? Is it social media, these newsletters, it is personal emails? Maybe more breaking down the day for me to understand and for the audience, to get to a report, this is what happens during a typical day or a week or a month.
Well, I don't have a typical day. I think every day is a little bit different. Social media moves so quickly. I feel like there's so much noise. There's something happening almost every single day. So it'll depend a little bit on that. But if I'm working on a report, a lot of my time is spent researching. So thinking about sort of the report cycle that I'm in, it takes a couple of weeks, I think, to actually get the report together. Anywhere between, I would say, 2 to 6 weeks, depending on the length of the report and the depth of the research. But the whole first chunk of time is really spent going through not only newsletters and the news, but really looking deeply into different data sources. I spend a lot of time in Excel and trying to make sense of, all of the numbers and comparing different data sets to put all of that together. and finding interesting stories from there. But if I'm not on a work site or on a report cycle, and something happens in the news, my days can be spent talking to reporters, putting together quotes for the press. And I would say that in terms of no matter what I'm working on, the very first thing I do is check my email to see what has happened, and check the news to see if there's anything that I need to or want to be commenting on that day.
Well, what is like the process there? Do you like some sources that you talk to, or there are like places like, let's say like Discord channels, things like that, sometimes that you also like look at, or because you might not really know those people? In your case, it's like I don't know if I can get like those data, since unless I really verify everything. That's so.
So a lot of stories that I write, or pretty much all the stories that I write, are very data-driven. So I tend to pull a lot of those stories directly from the data that I see, and then I go confirm that with what's actually going on in the real world. So sometimes you'll see a data set where you're seeing a trend like TikTok is really rising in time spent, but then you want to go out and actually talk to people and see what's actually going on there. Sometimes, of course, there are stories that come directly from things that I've seen in the news. And then it will go the other way, and I'll go, okay, does the data support this? But generally, I'll start with the data and go from there and confirm whatever hypothesis I've made from what I've seen.
And from like, from the research, and then there is like the reporting, and then after that is also like sharing, right, on social media. So when you like yourself a reporter, you said that you were on Facebook, like since the beginning of Facebook and everything. So I'm pretty sure that you saw it like changing a lot. What is like your relationship right now with social media? Like, do you use it mostly to distribute the content, or also to get either feedback or like thinking about like new stories to work on, for instance? Like what is your approach there?
Yeah, so I have started taking a lot to LinkedIn. I'd say that's probably my primary social platform right now. I don't know. I know, Alessandro, you're also active on LinkedIn. I don't know if you would say the same. Yeah. But we're also Instagram friends, so you know that I love Instagram. And I use a variety of different platforms. I'd say my relationship has sort of changed over time, but what's been really fascinating for me to watch is the relationship that younger generations have with social media versus the kind of relationship I grew up with in social, right? For us, it was really new. It was exciting. It was revolutionary. And it was a way to sort of connect not only to your immediate group, but to a larger group. And in the beginning, it felt, it still felt very exclusive and niche when you think about the beginnings of Facebook, because it was only college students or would-be college students who were allowed. Of course, that's not the case anymore. It is, it's public. And seeing this shift now, particularly with younger people, where many of them are preferring to, talk in group chats or in DMs over public broadcasting, it really reminds me of those early days of social media. And it's been this really fascinating shift. And in a way, it's kind of a devolution in terms of how social media is changing.
And yeah, that made me remember, like, back in the days with MSN, and it's throwback the first times on the internet where everyone was really just private. And then I do remember that before messages on Facebook was a thing. I don't know if you remember, but we tried to we exchanged messages, like private messages on each other's feeds. And sometimes I look back, I'm like, what were we thinking? We just exchanged messages like publicly like that, without caring about privacy, because it was not a thing,
And the worst part is Facebook likes to remind you about those. They'll say, on this day in 2006, you said this. And I'm like, oh, God, cringe.
That's why I cringe every day when I go back to my memories. I still check them all the time. I'm like, what was I thinking? But I think it's interesting, to go back and look what was it before, also to understand what could be the future sometimes of social media. So we're going to also discuss a bit more what is happening right now in a second. But if on the one side you are on social media, again, we say specifically LinkedIn, right, where you can basically really you can think about your post, you can edit as you like, you can take some of the time. On the other side, instead, you as a guest commentator of Bloomberg TV and CBS News and NBC News and many others, instead that is live TV, right? So it's different, right? How do you prepare for those? And again, how it is different, of course, compared to maybe a more, I would say, polished maybe presentation of yourself that, again, on social media you can really choose whatever, while on live TV can be different things at the same time and so on. So first of all, how did you get in there? Like, did you like, prepare yourself to do something like that? That is not easy for sure. And then now that, well, like, what did you learn compared to social media when it comes to like TV?
In terms of whether I was prepared, I studied journalism, broadcast journalism in particular. So I did have some training, but I will say I kind of just threw myself onto TV the first time and hoped for the best. And it went well. It's gone better ever since. But I think some of the biggest differences between, social media posting and TV spots, as well as report writing, is number one, the audience. When I'm writing a report, I'm writing primarily to a marketing and advertising audience, really trying to help them to understand how to use social media to make better business decisions. So a lot of my writing is geared toward that. On TV, it tends to be a more general public audience. And on social media, because I use a lot of LinkedIn, it's still professionals, but they're not necessarily within the marketing and advertising realm, but they want to learn. And so figuring out how to gear the content that I produce to each of those different audiences is always a number one step for me. On top of that, it's the delivery, right? So if I'm writing a report, I have a lot more word count, a lot more space to be able to get really granular and explain things thoroughly to the audience. Social media usually is just a snippet of the stuff that I have put into my report. And of course, I'll change some of the language, I'll change some of the text, to be able to really sort of resonate with the audience that I'm gearing it towards. On TV, the time is super limited. I mean, these spots only take a few minutes, and you have to be really snappy. You have to be able to get that message across quickly, smartly, but also in a really sort of snappy way so that it resonates. So I think that those would be some of the biggest differences between that.
Hello! Is your brand ready to amplify its reach? Well, the Influencer Marketing Factory is here to do just that. We are a global influencer marketing agency helping brands ignite their growth, from influencer identification to campaign strategy, handling legalities and agreements to managing shipping and logistics. We have it all covered. We work with hundreds of brands across different verticals, from Fortune 500 companies to DTC brands. And we don't just stop there. With detailed ROI analysis, we help brands like yours measure success, transforming impressions into actionable conversions. You can find us at the influencermarketingfactory.com or just search the Influencer Marketing Factory on Google.
It's challenging, right? To try to put everything that you have in your head in like 30 seconds and still get to the point, right? And it's so I'm pretty sure that it takes a bit of time, right, to get there. And it's also for me, like, fascinating how the same message changing, like, with the medium, right, all the time. So it's not just about the audience, but as you said, it's how you package everything. So it's quite fascinating that you're doing, like, the social media, right, but also like the live TV and also like the reporting. So all the time can be similar concepts, but like, put in a different way. And so again, you've been doing this, like for a good time. You've been working on many different social media, and there are so many things that on a daily basis changes, right? So like, the latest one, for instance, a few days ago with TikTok Shop, right? That finally they announced that they're gonna go very big on that. X and like now former Twitter that are doing so many things. One of the latest, like, job posting, for instance, right? And then there is generative AI for content creators. Again, so many different things. So do you have any suggestions for either other reporters or entrepreneurs, marketers that want to be in the loop of trends, but try not to be crushed in the noise of all newsletters, social media? Like, there is so much going on. So do you have any tips and be like, okay, this is how I select in the noise of different things happening daily?
Well, first, read my reports. That's kind of what I'm trying to do is cut through some of that noise and look at the bigger picture of what's going on. But I think, some advice is to have a few trusted sources. I think the way that we consume the news and the media has become incredibly fragmented, and making sure that there are a few voices or a few publications that you can turn to that really give you what you need to know, and in a smart and intelligent way, is number one. I think also understanding that sometimes these small changes relate to bigger trends, and sometimes they don't. And I think for me, the ones that I'll follow are ones where I say, okay, this one thing happened, for example, the launch of TikTok Shop. what is it related to in the bigger scheme of things? What is going on within social media? How much does this actually matter? And that helps me to answer the question of, is this something that I should pursue? And as you know, Alessandro, I've been pretty vocal about TikTok Shop because I do think social commerce is still very much uncharted territory here in the US, and something that's still up for grabs and will be a really interesting battle to watch play out.
And what do you think, also, again, social commerce has a lot of opportunities and potential, in China, Indonesia, and other countries have been a big thing for ages. Is there anything that you think, what is missing, in your opinion, based primarily on the data and insights that you got so far?
Well, so social commerce, I mean, it gets dismissed quite a lot, right? As something that just really hasn't taken off in the US, and that's not exactly right. From all the data that I've seen, there are plenty of people who are shopping and even buying from social media, but they may not necessarily be doing that directly on the platform. So what we see is that people are, clicking on links, they're going to retailer sites and completing the purchases there. And then in the case of TikTok and, that kind of shopping, you'll see that even sometimes those purchases will take place in stores later. So it's this sort of discovery-based shopping, which I think is very different from sort of the online shopping experience that has been shaped by Amazon, where you're really showing intent to purchase. You kind of know what you want to buy before you go onto that platform. And I think one of the reasons that, social commerce has been sort of not necessarily grown to the levels that we've seen in other countries, and I don't know that it ever really truly will or needs to be successful, is just that we have established habits. We also have established relationships with retailers, and consumer behavior is really difficult to change. I think one of the things that's working in TikTok's favor is not only that it has this strong roadmap and resources in China, but also because it caters to a younger audience. Many of their users are Gen Z, and their retailer loyalties and shopping habits aren't fully formed yet. They're also incredibly inspired by trends, by FOMO, and that's the kind of thing that TikTok really inspires, and that I think will turn it into, or could turn it into, a discovery-based shopping platform, which we really haven't seen quite yet.
Absolutely, no, great analysis. I think that the discovery is going to be very crucial. For instance, for me, it's still a bit of a mystery why Instagram removed the tab, for instance, because just these days I wanted to check on something, and it was not that easy for me to go and look for a product, while on TikTok, basically it's very easy. And now they also have the affiliate program. So basically, influencers can even just make money without a brand deal, but just talking about a product that they like, and people can click on a link and still buy. And so it's a win-win for everyone, right? The influencer makes money, or the content creator, right? The audience can maybe get a discount, the brand is selling more. So I can see the push, but I also do agree with you that it's still missing many different points that are, to become what it is in other countries. And very curious to see if it will ever get to that point. We don't know, right? So I'm very curious about that.
Well, one of the reasons social commerce has grown to be so big in China in particular is also to do with live shopping, which is something that TikTok is, trying to push. I mean, live commerce is not a mainstream or regular activity by any means in the US. I'm a little skeptical of whether it ever will be. I do think that there are some use cases, particularly for exclusive product launches, sort of lifestyle brands, D2C brands, ones that are really geared toward younger audiences and generate that kind of FOMO.
No, I do agree 100%. I think up until we will not have gamification happening in live streaming and incentives, could be big discounts, it could be drop collection, anything like that. It doesn't really make sense for someone in the US to spend an hour of their time during the day, right? Just to hope to get something, while again in China you have all these things happening at the same time, and that's why they want to go live streaming to buy. The intent is very big in China, right? When it comes to products, from cheap things to luxury products. So people buying things very expensive during a live streaming. That was quite fascinating to see. And so you mentioned before about your reports, right? How many do you write per quarter? Do you have a quota? Sometimes do you have or there are too many to feel like, how many do you usually write per year or quarter?
Per year, it usually ends up being around 12 to 15. But it depends. And not all of these are, very long or incredibly long reports. I do write some shorter reports as well, but I think that's probably around the range of reports that I write yearly.
And one of the latest one that you publish is about the state of influencer market, right, in 2023. Of course, I'm very interested in that. I had a sneak peek of some of the data, but what are some of the most interesting finding? And is there anything that either shocked you or something you were like not really expecting from this year looking at data and insights?
Yeah, and I think this is a great example of how my stories start with the data, right? So, of course, I'd been, hearing a lot about what's going on within the creator economy, how that relates to the Hollywood strikes, et cetera, et cetera. But we had a new forecast coming out on influencer marketing spending. And I started looking at the numbers. And what I realized was that influencer marketing spending was going to outpace social ad spending by 3.5 times this year. So marketers are going to increase their investments in influencer marketing by 14% per our forecast versus just 4% for social ad spending. So that really got me thinking about, okay, what is going on and how does this all relate to each other? And that really formed the basis of this report, which is arguing not only arguing that the marketers are finding creators to be more and more important to their strategies, but at the same time, creators are also rising in their own power and moving into different revenue streams, monetization models, as well as off of social media, which has a big impact on the way that marketers, media companies, and social platforms can work with them.
I can see that like we're going to the next level when it comes to influencer marketing. Before 10 years ago, was just like, these brand deals, $100 here you go, just put something about it. And now it's all about tracking. It's all about ROI analysis and so on. So let's break down some of the things that you just said. So first of all, about, paid media versus influencer marketing. So is there any other data there? Are you seeing anything such as, combination of those together? Or are you seeing mostly like just a shift? Because for instance, for us, we have been seeing influencer marketing as organic. And in addition to that, it's also like a lot of amplification of paid media. Are you seeing the same? Are you seeing something different, different stories there?
What I'm seeing is that at this point, most creator campaigns will include paid media amplification. So that is a huge trend. And that also means that creator content is a driving force behind social ad spending altogether, right? So these two are definitely interrelated. On the other side of things, I mean, what the other interesting point is that we're seeing this trend across platforms. So it's not only total influencer marketing spending that is outpacing total social ad spending on every single platform we track, whether that's TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat. The same trend is there. Influencer marketing spending on those platforms is growing faster than social ad spending on those platforms. And to me, like thinking about what's happened over the past couple of years and all of the struggles with social ad spending, whether that has to do with the economy, whether that has to do with Apple's privacy changes, it's really a sign that creators are incredibly resilient. They're flexible, and marketers are really starting to value those partnerships. But the next step is then understanding that they're bigger than those sponsorships on social media.
And because they are bigger than that, you already mentioned about like different revenue streams. Do you have any data on that? Like, are you noticing because of course brand deals are bringing usually the most, right? But what is then after? Is it like merchandising? Is it media licensing? Is it selling courses? Have you found anything that is working well for influencers these days?
Well, I just pulled some up while you asked about it.
Okay.
So sponsored content, primarily on social media, is still the number one revenue stream for most creators. So I'm looking at some data from Maverick here that shows that 82% of creators earned income through sponsored content. But the interesting thing here is that is down from 91% in 2022 or 2021, excuse me. At the same time, we've seen affiliate grow to 56% of creators earning income from 47% in 2021. And ad revenue is the third way that creators, or the third biggest way that creators earn income. And that has also grown to 33% this year, up from 18% in 2021. So you can see that sponsored content is still the number one way creators are earning money, but they are diversifying their revenue streams and becoming less reliant on that as they do.
Interesting also for the, like when you said that now that one that grew a lot is the like advertisement, right? So I'm pretty sure we're talking about like what, CPM models, like revenue sharing, that type of thing. Are we referring to that?
So this advertising revenue, I spoke to Maverick actually. This is direct advertising revenue, meaning like a display ad on a blog or on a newsletter. Okay. Ad revenue sharing is different, though I have seen in other data sets that ad revenue sharing has grown significantly. But I don't have that data on hand right now.
Okay. No, I was just curious because, again, I've been seeing now, of course, TikTok with the new fund that is helping also to get in, like, the top, the top videos, getting also a cut of that. YouTube, of course, has been the first one with the CPM model since the beginning of time, right? Instagram was introducing something like that. So I was curious to see also what was happening there. Anything else that you find fascinating or interesting from your report? Because again, we covered on the brand side, we covered on the influencer side, but is there anything else that you find again interesting there?
I think on the media side of things, this is something that I'm really passionate about, because one trend that I've been seeing, again, big picture, is really just the time that people are spending on TikTok, right? And what we are predicting is that by 2025, time spent on TikTok annually is going to surpass Facebook. And it's already surpassed Instagram. So that got me to think about, okay, why? What's going on? We all know these videos are addictive, of course, and people spend a ton of time scrolling. But what is it about it? And I started thinking about it and came to the conclusion that it's because people, especially young people, consider that a new form of entertainment, right? That's how they are going to be entertained. And then I started thinking about how that relates to what's going on in terms of the Hollywood strikes and what, if anything, creators have to gain from that. And what I started to notice was, and we ran a couple of studies, was that social media creator content isn't going to be a replacement for scripted TV, for example. But there is a growing opportunity for media companies to incorporate creator content into, for example, their streaming services, or to have creators star in some scripted shows, because consumers are interested, young consumers at least, are interested in that. And if you think about all of the struggles that have been going on within the streaming business, could be a new way to breathe some new life into those challenged businesses, and potentially offer a new value proposition, especially as streaming prices rise.
Absolutely. And also because a lot of influencers, the content creators, I don't know if many, but some of them, they surely start with social media because it's an easier way just to get known. But the final goal is to be on TV, on a TV show in Hollywood and so on, or just acting career, right? Or some of them, maybe they start with they want to become singers and be signed by a music label. The only way for them to be noticed is thanks to, let's say, TikTok, right? So even if they maybe don't sometimes it's planned, that is not planned, right, as a thing, but it's I think interesting that both they have to find a way, right, for influencers to maybe get to even a bigger audience and get paid with other type of contracts. And also, as you correctly said, media, they had to innovate, right? Because they had to understand that people want to see something that is different. And sometimes you can also just reduce the cost, right, of production, because you go from a big crew of hundreds of people, maybe just with a small group of 5 people that can get sometimes the same quality of content, right? Even better sometimes. So I think it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, and that's such a good point that you brought up about social media. The end goal for a lot of creators today isn't to be necessarily just on social media. They could be wanting to be on TV, be in Hollywood, start their own business, be an investor, entrepreneur. There are so many different paths that they can take. It truly has become a career path. And that's what I mean when I say creators are bigger than social media. And I'd like to also say that we're getting to this point where the social platforms need creators more than creators need them. And at the same time, though, I think it's important to remember how incredibly valuable the social media platforms have been in building the creator economy. I mean, they truly democratized content creation and gave creatives a way to monetize. So it really has, is still an incredibly valuable tool and valuable platform. But as creators grow in their importance and grow in their businesses, they're really starting to diversify outside of that as well.
And because of this that you just said, right, that social media, they need content creators, and social media are trying to win them over, right, with new features and, and be like, just showing them on and be like, hey, we actually can help you in growing and so on. What is happening on social media, like let's say in the past couple of years? Again, I know that for you as a operator, it's difficult to say it's bad, it's good, because it's always based on data, but based on the data, right, and the insight that you're seeing, what type of era of social media are we living in right now?
I think we're nearing sort of an inflection point, or at least there's this tension, right? And we started to talk about this a little bit earlier, but I think there's a lot of observers, a lot of people out there who like to say that social media is dead. There's so many obituaries of social media that I've read online over the past couple of months, and they all cite, the same reasons. It's Facebook's decline, the mess at Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. And all of those things are true. There are a lot of problems within social media, but it definitely isn't dead. All of the platforms, per our forecast at Insider Intelligence, are still adding users, right? But what we are seeing is an evolution and a devolution. So there's kind of these two opposing but parallel paths. And one is this idea of social media being entertainment that's being driven by creators and by TikTok. And the other is this devolution toward more private messaging where things are just happening in group chats and DMs. And I think that's what's been really fascinating for me to watch. And it's hard to say whether it's good or bad. I think from a marketer and advertiser angle, it's scary to see that shift more into private messaging, because those tend to be spaces that they can't participate in. But for consumers, I think it's a needed shift, because there have been a lot of issues on some of these social media platforms, just thinking about in terms of misinformation, mental health, where they may not want to be broadcasting so publicly.
Interesting. No, absolutely. And still on these, again, I asked it like majority of my question, but is there anything that I didn't ask you that you are either very bullish on, something that you're looking at, following closely more than other things?
So there's several things. I think one area of social media that I'm really fascinated in and that I'm following really closely is social search. I think that's a whole new frontier that we've hardly tapped into yet. And it's also an area where, the behavior is still pretty fragmented. For a lot of behaviors, we have our established platforms, and that's one where it's maybe not quite as clear. And the same with shopping. If you've read any of my recent LinkedIn posts, I'm pretty vocal on TikTok Shop. So that's one thing I'm following. And I'm also trying to sort of reframe the debate with Amazon versus TikTok. I believe that they are two different types of shopping experiences and not as much in competition as people believe. But I think those are the two biggest trends that I'm keeping a very close eye on right now, besides what we've already talked about.
Very interesting. Yeah, the search on social, absolutely. I think it's going to be even bigger, because, even myself, sometimes I'm like, okay, best place to eat in whatever, in a city. And you just find a bunch of videos that they tell you where to go, what to eat. You can save it. You can usually add it to maybe a Google Maps place. I add the link to the TikTok. So when I go there, I can order whatever, because it was so that one I think is going to be very interesting. And I saw already people selling courses about SEO for TikTok, how to get your position better there. So I think it's very interesting there. Have you noticed anything specific? Do you think that Are there any social media that are particularly working on that? I mean, of course, TikTok is doing that, but are you seeing any others working on that right now?
Yes. So we actually released a report. It was written by one of my colleagues that dug really deeply into social search and all of the changes that have been happening there. I mean, TikTok just recently released ads in search.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the latest move that I've seen. But if you look at, the development of sort of how advertising or search advertising in particular has developed on social media, I mean, Facebook or Meta is pretty far ahead in all of that. And it makes sense. I mean, there's a lot of search behavior happening on Instagram for a lot of the reasons that you mentioned. There's also a ton of search behavior happening on TikTok. And YouTube is another one that actually came from a survey that we conducted recently. A lot of Gen Z are searching on YouTube. And that was a little bit surprising to me because we always hear about TikTok in particular when it comes to search.
But it makes sense, right, for YouTube. I mean, like after Google, what is it, the second search engine, right? So, and it makes sense, right, because YouTube started, not just for entertainment, but a lot of the how-to and tutorials videos are there. So even, I don't know if that happened to you, but for myself, sometimes if I have to fix something, could be with my computer or something leaking at home or whatever, I just go, and sometimes Googling things is not enough. You want to see someone teaching you how to do things. So it makes sense, right, on why people also start looking at that. And there is a lot of SEO already, happening on YouTube, right? So it does make sense. Amazing. Jasmine, thank you so much for joining me today to share all this information. I'm pretty sure that you're gonna come out with some other very interesting reports. So for people that want to follow you, so you said that you're on LinkedIn, and you of course publish different reports, but where are the best places for people to learn more about yourself and find all the resources that you usually publish?
On my LinkedIn page is probably the best place to learn that. Many of my reports are clients only, but if you do want to check out some of the work that I've written, it's insiderintelligence.com, and you can search for me and my reports will appear.
Fantastic. Amazing. And nothing on Twitter, or is it primarily LinkedIn? How do you look at Twitter these days?
I am on Twitter, and I've been on Twitter for a very long time. I've never really been good at posting myself on Twitter. I mean, I follow and consume a lot of Twitter content and have for years, but you can follow me there. I'm Jasmine Enberg, I believe. But I don't post as much there as I do on other platforms.
I totally get it. It's the same for me. LinkedIn, I'm actively there. On Twitter, I'm one of those people just looking around.
You're a lurker like me.
Exactly, but I post maybe once in a while, and usually it's a reshare of our main page. So
yeah.
I totally get that. Jasmine, again, thank you so much. This was fantastic for sharing all your knowledge with us and the audience today. This was another episode of The Influence Factor by the Influencer Marketing Factory, and I'll see you next.